Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session about the UPSC interview, which, as you know, is the final stage of the UPSC preparation and the most feared and the most dreamt about experience of the life of a UPSC aspirant. Everybody dreams about it, everybody has nightmares about it, and everybody has fantasies about it. You imagine it going either very well or you imagine it going very badly, but in reality, the way it works is that it's almost always somewhere in the middle. And today I'll be sharing with you my own experiences from the 3 UPSC interviews which I have faced and what I learned from that process, and also what I have learned from some years of helping students get through the interview process and what that entails. Uh, I understand, and you should too, that the UPSC interview is not like the rest of the exam at all. And this is a stage in which, in person, physically, a group of very intelligent, sophisticated, eminent people will try to gauge and judge your suitability for a career in the civil services. And they'll do this on a number of parameters. And how best to respond to that type of a social situation, because it's not a casual conversation as you have with friends, and it's not strictly a viva voce in which you are supposed to answer very pinpointed technical questions. No, it's not a test of knowledge. It is essentially a test of your emotional intelligence, and it covers a number of areas which I'll tell you about. I will take you through my own experiences and what I learned from those experiences, and I would like it. In fact, I would insist that you learn from my mistakes more than anything else, and make sure that you don't commit the mistakes I made. And as I went through the stages that I went through subsequent interviews of my own journey, my interviews got better. I started to perform better, but at the outset, in the first one, I was not at all suitable for that, suitable or prepared for that type of an experience. So my first UPSC interview was actually a disaster, and it was a terrible experience for me. And although the board was very cordial, very nice, very objective, it was me who was at fault in the sense that I was not prepared enough for it, because my social skills at that time and my manner of speaking and my speech, my eloquence, my delivery, and my oration was not at all up to the mark, because I had remained isolated, socially isolated over the past year and a half, or couple of years because of my preparation, and I had no practice and nothing had prepared me for that sort of an experience. And I want to make sure that does not happen to you. So, as I went into the room in the first UPSC interview that I faced, I was faced with a group of people, eminent people. I don't know who they were because they didn't introduce themselves, but they were very gentle and nice and polite to me. But the first question they put to me, by the chairperson put to me, is that you're a tall guy, and he said something about the way I looked, and he said, why don't you do modeling and why don't you walk on the ramp? And that question, although it was not at all meant to be a question to put me in a spot or to make me uncomfortable, it was a very genuine and conversation starter sort of a question. But I didn't answer that very well. But as the interview progressed, I've noticed that they would cover all the areas. They asked me questions about India's foreign policy. One question was, can you recall India's agreement with Russia, and what is punch sheet? And they asked what the future of that relationship was. And another member asked me about some developments in science and technology. They asked me about Google Chrome. And another member then asked me about how I would allocate resources between water, education, health, and security in a district, given a uh, unit measure of 100 units, for instance. They asked me to allocate these percentage wise, and why I would allocate more to security or more to health, and what the reason was for my allocation. They wanted to very clearly and directly test my understanding of governance, my knowledge, my maturity. And admittedly, I did not perform very well because I didn't prepare myself very well for that first interview. But it taught me a lot, and I made sure that I did not make the mistakes in the same mistakes in my second interview. So what can you expect from the board? So I've experienced 3 of these interviews, and I've experienced a lot of many more mock interviews. I have been on the panel of mock interviews, and I've noticed some patterns. You see, what you can expect from the board is that the board will be objective. they will be polite, they will be very thorough, and they will do this professionally. It is very unlikely that your interview will revolve around just one question, although that may happen depending on which direction it takes, because it is a conversation and it's a very dynamic conversation. But essentially, they will try to cover as many areas as possible. So some of the areas that they will cover, surely, are: how mature are you? They'll try to gauge from various questions. What is your attitude towards weaker sections? Okay, I'll tell you more about that. They wish to see if you have the required emotional intelligence and empathy for a career in the civil services, right? And they might put many other questions to you, perhaps one or two from your optional subjects. In one of my interviews, I was asked what is good governance. I was asked who started the concept of good governance and what it means. And in another interview, I was asked about my hobbies, and it started with my hobbies. But in all three interviews, it went around the whole ambit of my DAF and the entire spectrum of what the interview board was looking for. They made sure that they asked questions. They always asked questions in all three occasions. The chairperson started the interview, and the other members then took turns and asked me questions. In all three interviews, it was a polite, professionally done, and a very elegantly managed experience, affair. I was never made to feel uncomfortable, and I could feel the board putting in the energy and the effort to try and understand me. So it was not at all a case of them grilling me or interrogating me or arguing with me, no, nothing like that. Wherever there was a mistake or wherever there was a problem, it was mine and not theirs. So you can expect this from the board when you go there, because they've done this before. You see, and the situation and the way you feel, the anxiety you feel, the nerves which you will feel at that time is not what the board will feel. The board has done this many times. Perhaps a member or two are members of the other state commissions. Perhaps they are psychologists. Perhaps they are professors. Perhaps they are retired diplomats or bureaucrats. You know, whatever they are well aware of what they are doing there, and so you can expect a professionally managed and a very all-around 360-degree coverage of what the interview process entails, just like you can expect in the mains exam that they'll cover all the areas which are mentioned in the syllabus. You can expect something like that in the interview, and it makes sense to prepare yourself accordingly and to have an overall view of the whole thing. And I'll tell you more about how this works. The one thing that has stood out over all my years of experience, all my interviews, and of course, my own experience as a civil servant, is that the UPSC interview is a test of your emotional intelligence and not of your knowledge. What is emotional intelligence, and how does this get tested in the UPSC interview? You see, emotional intelligence is a term of psychology, and I can go into the details of it, but essentially it means your ability to understand the emotions of the other person and to intelligently manage your own emotions, right? And how this is displayed in the interview is that they might ask you a question which is emotionally provoking, or a question which requires empathy, and they might see how you deal with that type of a question. Yes, how you display your own emotions. Are you able to control your anger, although they won't put you in that situation very often? How maturely do you understand the emotions behind the problem, or are you just completely analytical, right? And so it's a test of emotional intelligence, and what matters in the interview is how you respond to the questions and not necessarily what you respond to the question. So there might be a question or two which you don't know the answer to. And most students, most aspirants I have noticed in mock interviews, this is their worst nightmare, to face a question which they don't know the answer for. And all they can think about is various responses to that, right? And the best response to that is to try and start a conversation about that topic, regardless of the fact whether you know or not. Say, for instance, a question is put to you. What do you know about so-and-so, for instance, or perhaps some project which you did in your college exams, or whatever you might have done. They might ask you a factual type of question. And if you don't know the answer, and the best way to answer that would be, I don't recall the specifics, but I remember something about it. You can say something about it enough to have a conversation start. You see, it is the conversation that they will want to have with you on various topics, right? And they are noticing not only what you are saying, whether you are right or wrong, but whether you know that you're right or wrong, whether you know that you don't know, and whether you can admit this, and whether you can talk about this openly, and whether you can have a conversation despite not having the exact answer to that question, or whether the nerves overtake you and you become too nervous to give them a proper response. All of these things will dynamically get reflected and they will appear in front of them. You will not be able to hide, or you will not be able to manipulate the board because the social situation is such and they are professionals. So it is always best to be very honest, very candid, uh, to display character in the interview and to start to learn how to have these type of intelligent conversations. And I'll tell you more about how to do this, how to prepare. There are a number of things which are not often spoken about or shared with students, which I believe are rather important, and I think that you should know about them. And one of those things is body language is important, and everybody might tell you how bad body language is important, but what are the specifics of body language and how you'll make sure that it reflects the right type of persona that you want to display? Or more importantly, how do you make sure that you do not display or give away wrong signals, red flags? And what might be a red flag in a UPSC interview? A very simple example coming from body language and the research which has been done in that area. That's simple. Say, for instance, you are having a conversation. Now, there are two ways in which you may use your hands. You may use your palms. If you were to say the same thing with palms open, for instance, in this type of a gesture, you are explaining something like this using your palms. The same thing you might do using your fingers, and having your palms down on the table. If you have the palms down, it shows a very dominant type of behavior, and it does not show humility. In the interview, you probably want to have your palms up and a very open and sincere type of body language exuberance can go out from you. This is just a very small example. There are many things to be considered, and it matters from person to person how they display their body language and how what needs to be corrected, if at all anything needs to be corrected. And it's usually during mock interviews that I'm able to detect and tell the students that there is something that they need to figure out or perhaps change. Body language, of course, also covers the way you speak, the gap in the words that you use, how you form your sentences, and how much you think before you're responding. All of these things come under that ambit, right? Another very important thing, which I have mentioned before, which you should understand. Please do not get obsessed with the details in your DEF. Most people just obsess about what's written in the DEF and they start to worry about the knowledge part of it. If I did computer engineering, I did that a number of years ago, and I have done computer engineering, and if there are questions from computer engineering, then I should perhaps know all of computer engineering to make sure that I don't miss any question. That is not the right attitude in as far as the interview is concerned. The DEF consists of a list of conversation topics on which they may begin conversations with you. Your hobby section, what you did in school, how your performance was in college, although that's not very relevant to them, what your optional subjects were, are all conversation starters, right? It is just they want to understand the person behind the answers. They have only 20 minutes or 30 minutes to really get underneath your skin to understand if you are going to be a good fit for the civil services of the country, because it's a very different skill set. It's a very different personality which is required, and they have to figure out if that is the case. And the best way to do that is through the DAF, and it's a good common point because you have the same details as they do, and so it's a list of conversation starters. The thing to consider and the thing to prepare for in the DAF is how are you going to have conversation on all these different topics. So for instance, if you have mentioned in your hobbies that you do yoga or meditation, you don't have to obsess about the science of it. You don't have to memorize all various types of meditation techniques. A good question, perhaps, a question which might be put to you is how long have you been doing meditation and what have you learned from it? How has that helped your life? And a good answer from that is a genuine answer to that. right? And the genuine answer to that would sound something like this. So I've been doing meditation for a while, and I started because I realized that I could do with some balance of mind. And as I continued my practice, I started to experience a lot of positive effects, particularly in my concentration and my own emotional management. I could, my sleep improved, my emotional management improved, my performance improved, my productivity increased. I was a more peaceful person, and it brought to me an overall sense of well-being, which I realized that I already had inside. And it brought to me a sense of satisfaction, this source of satisfaction that was always there, but I had never really realized it. And this meditation is just something which always puts me back into that mode. And so it has become a integral part of my lifestyle, and I always go back to it. And it is a very reassuring sort of experience for me because it's always available. And that's the reason I do meditation. And that's the reason why I also recommend meditation to my friends. So that type of an answer is a good one. You've said a number of things about yourself, about meditation. You have shown that you not only understand meditation, but you understand how it affects you. You understand what the practical use of it is, right? Stuff like this is welcome and is usually going to get you a very good reaction from them. It is very easy sometimes during questioning that you lose yourself in your answer and that you become emotionally attached to what you're saying and that you feel as if you have to hold your ground, as if you have to argue and defend it at all costs, and that will determine everything. That in fact is a lapse in your own emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence entails you figuring out when to hold strongly to your opinions and when to let them go and have an accommodating mindset. So for instance, if there is a question, and one question was put to me in one of my interviews, and that was that what can you tell us about, and how would you like to improve the lives of some of people in Naxal affected areas? That was a question which was put to me, right? And that debate started to go in various directions, and it almost went into a stage of argument, almost, where I could have stood my ground, but I realized that it's completely fruitless. This is not what I'm there to do, And instead, what I did was I actually agreed with a member, and I said, I remember it was a lady. And I remember, ma'am, I completely agree with your point of view, and I think that it should be taken into consideration, and it's something lacking. But there's always the other side of it also, which is that administration has to function in the practicalities of the world, and it's a very difficult thing, sometimes a gray area even, to have the values of the administration which we wish to entail and what the policies actually say. And there is a dissatisfaction between the people who live in this area, and it is the root cause of the whole issue. So governance, in as much as their role is concerned, has to figure out ways, tangible, effective ways, to make sure this dissatisfaction goes down. It's a psychological problem more than it is anything else, and it stems from the economic disparity which has increased over the past few years, something like that, I said. And that really helped. That member formed a favorable opinion, and she was satisfied with my answer. I could tell that much. Stuff like this will help you, and it will really add value to you. Another thing, of course, which you should consider is you need to make eye contact when you speak to somebody, but this eye contact has to be respectful eye contact. Eye contact means I am paying attention to you. I have heard what you said. All my attention and energy, in all sincerity, is towards the answering of your question, and I will try my best to answer that question. I will try my best to address this question, and in that should be reflected. You feel that, if you feel that, your eyes will automatically communicate that. So that type of eye contact is important, and you should do. Never stare and never look away. Don't shy away from the eye contact. Make sure that the eye contact is maintained. It's a very respectful and a very dignified eye contact. You know what I mean? And this comes with practice, and I'll tell you more about that, of course. Like I mentioned before, it's about intelligent conversation. Okay? And it is not not incumbent on you. You're not obligated to have intelligent conversations about everything. That is not possible. It is a sign of a mature person to admit that they do not know enough about something. It shows a strength of character, it shows integrity, it shows candor. But at the end of it, you have to understand that it's about intelligent conversation, right? You have to answer the question in the manner in which it was asked. If it is a very simple question, what is good governance? What is punchil? You try to answer it to the best of your abilities. You don't have to just enlist the points. You don't need to enlist the points of punchil when they ask you what punchil is. You can say that punchil is it's a milestone in India's foreign relations with Russia, in which few principles were agreed upon, and you can elaborate on that, and then you can have a conversation if they ask you further questions about it. They're not looking for a textbook answer. This is something I'm repeating, something you'll have to practice, and it will come with some practice. And the thing with these intelligent conversations is that we usually never have them. Mostly never have them. You may hear of them perhaps in debates which you see on TV. You may have them in your head with your own self. But it's very hard to have them with someone else. It's because people mostly have divergent opinions, and it's very hard to have a very intelligent conversation which can go on for a while on a topic, right? And so you need to practice this. The ability to have conversation which is intellectually stimulating and meaningful is hard, okay? And it's not easy, and they're not easy to come by. You have to put yourself in situations where they are likely to happen, and then try to have as many of them as possible. I've also mentioned that you should display character, integrity, and maturity. And by this, I don't mean that you should go out of the way and make sure that instead of answering the question directly, you are focusing and displaying some of these characters and making sure that that is communicated. No need to do that. What you need to just do is, like I said, it all boils down to emotional intelligence. This also is a subset of emotional intelligence. How do you display character, integrity, and maturity? You display it by thinking deeply about a question and trying to answer it to the best of your abilities, and showing that you have understood that there are two sides of it. Okay, there might be a question in which they might ask you a particularly direct question, and it may require a unilateral answer, and you say, okay. So for instance, if somebody asks you, what do you think about India's stand in the Russia-Ukraine conflict? And that might be a very clear-cut idea in your mind about what that should be. And no, they're not looking for your revolutionary ideas. They're looking for the balance of your ideas. So in a question like that, which is even slightly open-ended, it is best to put both sides and to show that this is the situation. And what India should do in a situation like this is perhaps what is strategically important. And it's always a difficult thing to balance the morality and ethics of a decision versus the future impact of the decision of the country, for the people of the country. And that's a very difficult policy decision to make. And so, in my opinion, based on the limited information which I have, India should follow perhaps this type of course, given these type of eventualities, and maybe as the situation evolves, we should have enough room to maneuver around it and to not perhaps get caught in the crossfire or to get embroiled in anything else. And so stuff like this, generically speaking, you can talk about, and that is how you display character, integrity, maturity. Essentially boils down to emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence essentially boils down to your appreciation of the viewpoint of others, your viewpoint, the appreciation of the viewpoint of other people, other sections, other sides of the argument, not getting stuck and not becoming adamant and stubborn and emotionally attached to your stand, having an open mind and admitting that there is complexity in the world and showing appreciation and insight into that complexity. You show that and it will be a bullseye, I can tell you that much. This is what they're looking for. Not always possible, and it's not always displayed in every question. If they ask you 10 questions and perhaps one or two, it may get displayed, but it's like I said, organic, dynamic process. You go with that mindset and sooner or later it will get displayed. That much is certain, right? And the last thing that I would like to tell you is, it is very, very important that you have practice in this. And by practice, I mean actually opening your mouth and talking like I am doing in front of the laptop, in front of the camera, even though there's no one else here in the room. I have to do this in order to improve my delivery, my communication, my oration. I have to make sure that my thoughts are translated into words. Those words are translated into simple sentences, which are then conveyed, which can be understood by the other person, regardless of their background, right? And so this requires practice. This is, like I've said about other things, it's a neuromuscular thing. You have to literally practice. Your tongue literally leads the practice. Your jaw needs to move. You need to talk. You need to speak and uh, actually evocate. You have to put the words out there. You have to have conversations. You have to be prepared for looking foolish. You have to be prepared for looking like an idiot, perhaps, embarrassed a little bit, maybe. Accept that. No problem in that. Very, very, very small price to pay for the reward that is in the offing. No problem in that. If you practice public speaking, if you practice intelligent conversations, if you are conscious about how your sentences will be perceived and understood, if while talking you can think about the other person and you can calibrate your message to make sure the other person understands, put the other person as a primacy in your mind, and then convey your message. If you can do that, then you have mastered that part about the communication skills. Right? And like I said, a lot of things go into it. Practice is very important. As many mock tests as you can give, you should give. As many as possible. As many as possible. I think it's a very good idea to record yourself. This is also something I can tell you from experience. Not only from my interviews, but because of all of these videos and tutorials which I make for you, that it has improved over time. And as I have practiced and as I have done more of it, there is still a lot of improvement to be done. But there certainly has been a difference. And this recording experience has been very, very enriching for me, because I have grown accustomed to switching on the camera and having a conversation with nobody but myself in front. And so this is a thing which requires a bit of practice, but everyone has it. You can do this. This is doable, and it also will unlock a very important aspect of your personality. If you start to communicate well, which is what is exactly required in the interview. If you can convey your thoughts well, then half of the interview process, at least, will be simplified for you. I understand that not all people, not all students have practice, have had debates, have practiced public speaking at all in their lives or in their colleges, and perhaps they don't have, perhaps you don't feel like you have enough language skills to communicate. But I would beg to disagree here and tell you that you do have the language skills already. In fact, it's one of the most developed faculties which humans have. You cannot possibly enter the UPSC interview without having language skills. It is not possible. You've been thoroughly tested in the mains exam, in the prelims also, with all this enormous amounts of knowledge in your head. You having gone through gigabytes worth of language content, you have the language ability. You may not have the language to express it. And it may take some time for you to bring it out. This practice, this repeated practice will bring it out. And you will also notice, as it starts, the first few minutes of your conversation or your talk or your dialogue will be a little rusty. It will have friction. As time elapses, your speech will get smoother. It will flow more easily. It will become automatic. You will enter into what is otherwise called as a state of flow. And I understand that it is not always possible to do that in the interview. But even a few seconds of that here or there, and one answer or the other is going to get the job done. And in any case, you won't make blunders or you won't make mistakes. Okay? And this is something which requires time. It is better to start grooming yourself from the outset. If you have the interview upcoming in a few days or a few weeks, then please get started. Start recording yourself. Start having conversation with others. Put yourself in a formal situation where others are watching you. You see, that has a very important impact on the mind. Humans are social creatures. I've told you many times before. Unless you put yourself in front of others who are looking at you, judging you, and you feel the nervousness, you feel the eyes on you, the performance will not come. Okay? And whatever you do, you will not be well prepared for that social situation, because I am telling you, it will feel completely different. You go sit there, you will not realize it. It will be over in a blink of an eye. Time will elapse like this in the interview. It will last 30 minutes, 40, maybe 20. I don't know how long it will last for you, but typically lasts around that time. And it's very important to have those language muscles flowing in your head, so that when you sit there and when you start talking, a decent amount of content, language, sentences, paragraphs, thoughts are conveyed. Very important. That being said, I will do everything I can to help students who have cleared the mains and are now appearing for the interview. I will try to bear in and bring the insight of psychology which I have, couple that with the experience that I have, and I'll try to make sure that your preparation for the interview is good, so that you may feel confident, so that you may feel positive, and so that you may exude both this confidence and this positivity in the interview. And with that, I'll leave you, and I will see you very soon next time.